Hi there, and welcome once again to the Intersex podcast. I'm Joe Roberts, and thank you very much for listening. The title of this podcast is A Change of Direction. So, for quite a while now, I've had a lot of ideas for this podcast that I wanted to expand it above and beyond the direction that I've been going in. And I also wanted to talk about subjects other than issues relating to having a difference in sexual development. And whilst I still want to talk about those kind of issues in the future, I do want to talk about other topics as well and expand beyond that very sort of narrow subject matter. So this will really be the last podcast that I'll be making under the current sort of incarnation of this podcast, as it were, and it'll also be retitled and it'll be known in future as the Joe Roberts podcast, and there'll be a much wider variety of topics spoken about. I've been making this podcast for a couple of years now, and I sort of wanted and had aspirations to reach a much wider audience than I actually have. Obviously, I realise with the subject matter that I've been talking about, which is still not spoken about very frequently in society, obviously I realise that it wasn't going to reach a huge audience, but I had some hopes to sort of reach a lot more people than I actually have, and I wanted to sort of raise awareness of the subject matter of differences in sexual development, but it hasn't really gone exactly how I wanted it to, and generally I'd hoped to have reached a lot more people, but I'm not giving up on talking about the topic altogether. It's just that I will be talking about other things as well. So one of those things, which I'll be talking about in a future podcast, is that I recently lodged a series of Freedom of Information requests with the NHS in Scotland to try and obtain information about how many surgeries have been carried out over the past couple of decades in Scotland on young people and children with differences in sexual development. That was kind of the crux of my entire channel. The idea that it's a human rights concern to carry out surgeries on people when they're not old enough to consent to them. So I've lodged a series of Freedom of Information requests with the NHS in Scotland to try and obtain that information. So whatever response I get back, that'll be covered in a future podcast. And that's pretty much everything. I did say this was going to be a short podcast, this one. So I hope that you tune in to this podcast again. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, please do so. Please consider listening to some of my other podcasts. Consider liking and subscribing and leaving a comment should you want to do so. But bye for now, and thanks for listening.